Hi everyone, so this is just a quick video to update you on what's going on with the Altogether IPA. So where we're at in terms of what we're doing for the homebrew kind of side of things. I'm going to go through some recipes on this as well in terms of different brewing methods. So if you do kit or extract brewing, you can still get involved with this, and talk about how we're going to be getting together to do some of the brews on the coming weekend and a couple of weeks after that as well. Okay, so on the commercial side of things, there are now 559 breweries taking part in this. As of the time that I'm making this video, that's across 39 different countries. And in the UK, we've got at the moment 16 different breweries participating. So I'll put a list up of those different breweries. Some of them I mentioned on the previous video, but there's been quite a few added to that already. Some of them are already getting quite ahead in terms of getting the beers out there. So Track Brewing already have the beer on their website ready for pre-order, so you can get on there and pre-order their version of it if you want to have something to compare your homebrew versions to. And I'm sure quite a few of the others will be coming out with those soon as well, so keep an eye on their websites for details of when you can get hold of those beers. Just a quick reminder for anyone who hasn't watched the previous video, the Altogether IPA project is basically a collaborative brew that commercial breweries are doing, following the same sort of set recipe, and everyone who's brewing that beer is agreeing to contribute a small portion of the proceeds from that to charitable causes related to the hospitality industry, or to support the businesses in their local area and so on. So yeah, there's loads of places doing it. There's going to be plenty of options in terms of getting hold of the commercial version. If you want to brew your own version of it, doesn't really matter what type of brewing you're doing, because I've come up with a few sort of recipe ideas for how you can do something similar, whether you be kit extracts or all grain brewer. The all grain recipe is already up there in the public domain at a scaled version for you on the Craft Beer and Brewing website, so the link for that will be below. But I'm just going to run through the version of it that I'm going to be doing in terms of how I've adapted it for my kit, and a couple of minor changes that I will make to it for my own brewing. Whether or not you want to follow that or do something similar is obviously up to you, but adapt the recipe as you see fit for your own needs. You may not have all of the ingredients, you may have different equipment, you may have to do the process slightly differently, but if you want to take part, don't let that be an obstacle to it. I don't think anyone's going to be that fussed about people following the original recipe that stringently. So let's go through some of those recipe ideas, and if you've got any suggestions yourself, then please feel free to throw them in the comments below afterwards. Okay, so I've come up with a few different versions of the recipe for different brewing methods. Basically a kind of pimped up kit beer recipe, an extract beer, and a kind of partial mash variation on that as well. And I'll also go through my own all grain version of this as well. So yeah, these aren't tried and trusted recipes, but if you want to do it a different way, or you're a bit limited in terms of your options, then these might give you a starting point anyway. So like I said, don't take these as definitive versions of it that will work well. I don't know, I've not tried them and tested them, but yeah, it was just something I thought I'd do so that if you're not an all grain brewer, you can potentially get involved as well. So let's just go through the Pimped Kit Recipe first of all. So the starting point for this is just to choose a basic IPA kit. If anything, the less flavour in it, the better really. So you've got a fairly blank slate to start with, but you want something that's got a reasonable level of base bitterness to start with. So something like a Cooper's IPA kit or similar would be good. So yeah, the 1 can kits would be fine. So if I was going to use one of those, I would take that kit, drop the volume down to 19 litres that I was brewing to, because that's going to help to push up the original gravity to start with. Not many of the kits, if you brew them as to the instructions, are going to be much above sort of 1045 to 1050 OG at best. unless you're getting like one of the big IPA kits, and we're aiming for 1060 here. So I'd drop the volume down to 19 litres, brew it short basically, and then add enough DME or dextrose to get your gravity up to that 1060 starting point as per the original recipe. So just as a rough guide for that, you're going to need to add about 520 grams of DME or 620 grams of dextrose, or a combination of those two, to add 10 gravity points to 19 litres. So depending on where your starting gravity is, you can kind of work that out and add those either afterwards, or you can work it out in advance if you're able to calculate your original gravity when you're brewing it short to 19 litres. Once you've got your gravity sorted out, I would then go for making a hop tea. This is in place of the Whirlpool additions that you would be doing for all grain. So make a hop tea with 40 grams of Mosaic and 28 grams of Cascade. You can use a cafetière for that, or just put some hops into a bag and steep them in a jug of water that's just come off the boil. Do that for about 20-30 minutes, I would say, and then just add that into the wort itself. So you may want to make an allowance for the volume of that, again with your volume that's going into the fermenter, just to take that away. Pitch the yeast and ferment as usual. At the end of the fermentation, you will then dry hop to the same schedule as the all grain recipe. So 83 grams of Mosaic, 43 grams of Cascade, Citra and Simcoe added in as a dry hop. And that's it really. So otherwise just package and proceed as you normally would. For the extract recipe that I've come up with, the main obstacle here is that you don't have oat extract, as far as I can tell. I've never really got into extract brewing myself, so if any of you out there watching this are more knowledgeable on that, please feel free to correct me here, but I don't believe there is a sort of oat extract available at all. So what you could do is substitute some wheat extract for that. So assuming that you're using dry malt extract, the recipe will work out for a 19 litre batch at around 2.5 kilos of light DME, 0.5 kilos of wheat. You would then want to steep 200 grams of your carapils or light crystal, and then after that basically just boil for 60 minutes and follow the same hop schedule as you would for the all grain recipe. So pretty straightforward, except you're obviously substituting the wheat for the oats, because you can't steep oats as far as I know. Again, please correct me if I'm talking out of my arse there. If you do want to get the oats involved though, you can go for a partial mash version of this. So to do that, I would mash 1.6 kilos of pale malt with your 800 grams of oats and 200 grams of carapils. You want to do that in 10 litres of water. Get your mash temp to 68 degrees as per the all grain recipe for 60 minutes, and then top up the wort to your usual pre-boil volume with 1.5 kilos of dry malt extract in there as well. That should get you to around 1060 OG, and you've effectively got the the full complement of ingredients there as you have for the all grain recipe as well. The advantage of doing that is that you can obviously do a small mash in a smaller container. So if you don't have the equipment to be mashing full scale volumes for this recipe, you could still achieve a similar result by doing that mini mash in a big stock pot or something like that. And again, once you've done that and you've got your pre-boil volume, you would just boil for 60 minutes as per usual and follow the hop schedule as per the all grain recipe. So yeah, those are some options there for you if you're a kit or an extract brewer. I'm just going to go through my version of the all grain recipe now quickly for you. So one thing that I've changed at the start is I've upped the batch size to 21 litres. If you're using, as in this recipe, nearly 200 grams or actually over 200 grams of dry hops, then you're going to be seeing some pretty big losses at the end out of the fermenter, in addition to the usual loss through the tube and so on. So I basically added a couple of litres to the batch size to account for that, and to hopefully get closer to filling an actual keg with this. So yeah, I would expect to see at least 2 litres of losses, if not more, based on the amount of hops that are going into this and the size of the batch anyway. So yeah, I've upped the batch size to 21 litres. You could even push it up to 23 just to make sure you definitely get a full keg out of it, but 21 should be near enough. I'm working on a brew house efficiency of 70% because well, normally I'd be working on 75, but I tend to find with the higher gravity beers, and especially if I'm using quite a high percentage of oats in them, that will push my efficiency down a little bit. So I'm working on 70% efficiency. I think the original recipe was based on 72. And as far as the grist goes, it's pretty true to the original recipe. We don't have 2-row as such over here in the UK, so you could pretty much substitute that for any pale malt, but I've decided to use some Pilsner malt, mainly because I've got shitloads of it in at the moment, and I did use it on a previous West Coast IPA. I did the Barrel Scraper IPA that's on a video, couple of videos back, and it worked perfectly fine in that, so I'm going to do the same with this. So 4.75 kilos of lager malt, and then I'm using flaked oats, but I'm going to use 640 grams of the flaked oats, and in addition to that I'm using 250 grams of golden naked oats because I've got yeah, half a bag of that left over that I thought I might as well chuck in. So I've got the same kind of total quantity of oats there, but I've just split it between standard flaked oats and the Simpson's golden naked oats, which are pretty good. I've used them a couple of times before, and they do work quite well in this sort of beer. And then we've got the caramel malt. I didn't have any carapils, so I've just gone for the lightest crystal malt that I've got in, which is a 20 EBC 10 Lovibond light crystal malt, and that's 220 grams of that. As far as the hop additions go, I've slightly adjusted the initial boil addition. So my Columbus that I've got in at the moment is 15.3 alpha acid percentage, so I've dropped that down to 26 grams at 60 minutes to keep the IBUs around 60 in total. And then my steeping additions, because of the adjustment to batch size, are slightly higher. So we've got 45 grams of Mosaic and 31 grams of Cascade. I'm going to steep them for 20 minutes at 80 degrees C. That will add roughly 12 IBUs extra on top of the what's coming from the boil addition at 60 minutes. Yeast, I'm either going to use Safale US05, or I might put Laumon Bry 97 into it. I'm not sure yet which one of those, but it's definitely going to be one of the dry yeast because I've not got anything else prepared for that. And yeah, I just want to keep it simple on that front. So that's the yeast. And then the dry hop, again, with the increase in batch size, I will need to put in 92 grams of Mosaic, 48 grams of Cascade, 48 grams of Citra, and 48 grams of Simcoe. So it's a fairly hefty dry hop there. That's pushing 250 grams nearly. 338 grams of hops in total. So it's going to be, yeah, a bit of a hop bomb there. According to the software, yeah, all the numbers pretty much match up to what we're looking at on that original recipe. So 1060 OG, 60 IBUs, 6% ABV, and a final gravity of 10-15 maybe. The mash temperature is fairly high on this, according to the original recipe, at 68 degrees. So that's why the final gravity is fairly high, particularly for that sort of yeast, which I would normally expect to finish a bit lower than that if you were following a normal mash temperature. So yeah, only really minor adjustments there, and increasing the batch size, which has obviously increased the quantities of the ingredients for this. Other than that, the only other thing to talk about is water. There's not really a specific guide to the water on the original recipe. It just sort of mentions some rough numbers that you might want to aim for. When they mentioned calcium sulfate, which is gypsum, and 150 ppm, I assumed they were talking about the total ppm of sulfate. that you might want to aim for. So based on that, I've gone with the kind of standard American Pale Ale water profile that I would normally do anyway, based on using RO water as a starting point. So I'm going to be using 100% RO water to begin with, and I will be adding to that, because I like to keep my water additions as simple as possible, just gypsum or calcium sulfate and calcium chloride. The gypsum addition comes in, obviously this is not necessarily going to be the same quantities that you would want to add, because it totally depends on your water volumes and all that kind of stuff. But just to give you an idea, I will be looking at about 8.5 grams of gypsum and just over 3 grams of calcium chloride, and that should give me a finished water profile of 90 ppm calcium, 150 ppm of sulfate, and just under 50 ppm of chloride. That's going to give you the sort of sulfate to chloride ratio that should work quite well for a hoppy beer. In this case, I'm doing the West Coast version of it, so you want that kind of bitterness and hop flavor emphasized through the sulfate to chloride ratio, which works out at about 3:1 in this case. Plenty of calcium there for the other factors in your mash and fermentation that you want a decent amount of calcium for. And I don't really bother worrying about the magnesium, sodium if I don't have to in terms of water additions. So that is it. I will need to add a little bit of phosphoric acid just to bring the mash pH down, so probably a couple of mils of phosphoric acid into the mash, and that's about it. So yeah, the only other thing that we need to talk about is the live brew day for this. So I will be brewing this one live on my YouTube channel. That's going to be happening on Saturday the 18th of April, so Saturday just coming. And there's also going to be hopefully quite a few people joining in to do basically live brews together via the BrewTube Facebook group. So if you're interested in watching any of that, please get onto the BrewTube Facebook group, and there's an event on there for this. We've also put a date in for the 2nd of May, I think, which is 2 weeks after that. So I know there's some groups which are looking at doing brews on the 2nd of May. Myself and a few other people are doing brews on the 18th. We'll be setting up some online video meetings while we're doing that as well. So if you are brewing at that time and you want to get involved, that's great. If you just want to pop your head in and see what's going on, you can do that as well. Either way is fine. If you're brewing the beer at a different time, doesn't matter, but you know, just jump on that group and let us know how it goes and stuff as well. And hopefully a little bit further down the line, we'll be able to organize some online kind of tasting meetings as well, where we can maybe get some of the commercial versions of the beer in individually and try those out versus our own homebrewed versions. So should be good, and hopefully I'll see a few of you on the 18th. I'm not sure exactly how I'm going to manage doing the live stream and the kind of video conferencing brewing thing at the same time, so it may work, it may be a bit of a shambles, I don't know, but you can you can tune in and find out for yourself on the day. All right, so yeah, that's it for today. Cheers, guys.
I'm the dude, so that's what you call me, you know? That or his dudeness, or duder, or, you know, El Duderino, if you're not into the whole brevity thing.